Hey everybody, welcome to today's webcast, CSP Business Going Beyond Microsoft. Today's webcast is sponsored by AppDirect and brought to you by rcpmag.com. I'm Chris Flack and I'll be your host for today's event. Thank you all for joining. Just a few quick things before we begin today's presentation and get started with the audience, just a couple of quick reminders. First things first is we are recording today's event for future viewing and listening purposes. We'll send you a link within 24 hours after the show where you can view the replay. We encourage you to share that with coworkers, colleagues, friends, anybody who may be interested on today's topic. We greatly appreciate that. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of today's program. However, we do encourage you, if you have a question at any point for either of our presenters, to please feel free to enter it via the Ask a Question box on the left-hand side of your console. And hopefully, if time permits, we'll get to everybody's questions and we'll get out some answers. Now, if we don't get to all your questions, don't take offense. We'll have the speakers get in touch with you once the presentation is over. And if your questions for our sponsor, AppDirect, they will gladly get in touch with you once the presentation is over as well. So please feel free to submit as many questions as you want, though. We encourage your participation throughout today's program. Really briefly, before we introduce all the presenters in today's webcast, let me introduce you to your main moderator and host. His name is Scott Becker. He's editor-in-chief of Redmond Channel Partner. You can reach him on Twitter at Scott Becker. You can check out his email. He's always open to answering questions from his readers. You can email him. His email is right there on the screen. And you can read his blog, which is featured on rcpmag.com. But Scott is also just a really wonderful presenter, and he's a really great guy. I've worked with him for numerous years here at rcpmag.com. So without any further ado, I will hand the presentation over to Scott so that way he can get started with the show. So Scott, please feel free to take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. Great topic, cloud solution providers, and how to go beyond Microsoft. The idea is with a base of Microsoft services, but where can you find revenues? Where are people finding success in in bundling other products, other services around CSP, and really using the main idea of CSP to create interesting solutions for customers. Joining me today is an old friend. Is almost as long as I've been covering the channel. I've known Howard. And I've been at RCP since 2005. Howard's been in the channel for a lot longer than that, and he was in the channel for a long time, and then he's been writing about the channel and consulting on the channel for I think about the last 9 years. And the wonderful thing about Howard is that he's been around forever. No offense, Howard, and so he knows everything about how things were done. But he's not ever been hidebound in any way. He's always looking ahead. So things that worked in the past that aren't necessarily going to work in the future, he's one of the smartest people I've met about identifying what those are. When you talk about babies and bathwaters, Howard's really good at not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And the other thing that I really value about Howard is that he's never afraid to tell you which one is the baby and which one is the bathwater. Howard, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you there, young feller. You had to play the old card, huh? Boy, oh boy.
I played the experience card, Howard.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
That softened the blow. Okay.
So I just want to quickly, I advanced too quickly. I just wanted to thank our sponsor, AppDirect, and we'll have a message from them later on today, but just delighted that we're able to present this information today, and it's thanks to them.
Never skip the sponsor.
Where the CSP money is, that's our focus today, and so we'll be talking a lot about that. I thought before we got into that, we should just quickly level set about what CSP is. You never want to assume that people know your acronyms. So CSP is the Cloud Solution Provider Program from Microsoft. It's a few years old now. I think it was sort of previewed in 2014, formally launched in 2015. And then there's just been iterations each year, and it's gotten bigger. So from a technology standpoint, it covers most of Microsoft's cloud products, things like Office 365, Azure, Dynamics 365, Microsoft Intune, EMS, and then Windows 10 Enterprise, and I think Microsoft 365 might be in there now as well. Although that's like a superset of those other technologies that are listed. The really important thing about it, though, is the business model approach, where ever since Microsoft came out with BPOS, I think in 2009, customers were clamoring to be able to control their billing. And then Office 365, I think, was about 2011, and partners were excited about that, but it was still the same issue. And with CSP, Microsoft has introduced a way for partners to bill the customers. Now, part of that, with great power comes great responsibility. They've first got to have the billing infrastructure to do it. Partners have to support their customers. They have to operate their web portals if they're doing bundles, beyond the Microsoft technologies. But the payoff is that they get to set their pricing, on the solutions. So I just wanted to talk quickly about what the CSP program sort of looks like now. And these are figures from late last year, and for a program that grows at double digits monthly in terms of membership, these are slightly outdated numbers, but they give you an idea. So there are different tiers, and we'll go into those in a minute. But the indirect providers, there are about 14 of those in the U.S. The direct providers, there are about 800, and the indirect resellers are about 7,200. So this was, out of a base of 8,000 partners, you've got roughly 90% are these indirect resellers. And those indirect resellers sell through. And let me go back. Those indirect resellers at the bottom sell through the indirect providers, or they get their cloud licensing from the indirect providers, and the indirect providers provide a lot of services. The direct providers are the Microsoft partners who actually sell directly to the customers. They get the licenses from Microsoft rather than from one of the indirect providers, and so there are 14 of them now, and that's a huge jump from a couple years ago. I think there were 5 or 6 in the U.S. And it's really a mix. There were the distributors in there, the ones you'd expect, like Ingram and Tech Data and Cenex. There's companies like D&H, which is sort of an SMB distributor. But then you've got people like SBS Group, which is really Dynamics focused. You've got AppRiver, which is like an email security company. You've got Insight, which is a large solution provider, in its own right. So you've got people coming from all these different angles, offering slightly different services for CSPs. But what I think is most interesting there is that this market has really exploded, and there are a lot of choices for partners. So Howard, let me bring you in here. Talking about the evolution of the Microsoft Partner Program and how how the CSP program looks to you in terms of whether Microsoft has gotten it right.
Yeah, and before I do, Scott, I just wanted to add something to something that you said a moment ago about pricing control. One of the most important strategic foundational bedrock of the CSP program was to make sure that the partner owned control of the customer, not just the pricing, but the whole customer relationship, because there were always
that's a great point. Yep.
Yanks back and forth between the field seller, the Microsoft field sellers, and the partner sales organizations. Now Microsoft has made it very clear: you own the customer, you own the customer responsibility. The customer sees you and Microsoft behind you, and that, from a strategic, from a philosophical standpoint, that's a very important bedrock to the program. The history that you've put here in these 3 rings is kind of funny. I go back, as you've pointed out so aptly, way before MSPP. I've been working with Microsoft since 1981, really, 82, the dark ages, as it were. And much later on, Allison Watson has been given credit for creating the Microsoft Partner Program, which was something that you enrolled in and signed up for. I remember having a conversation with Allison just before it was announced and saying to her, I'm lonely. My biggest problem with Microsoft is that I'm lonely. I have nobody to talk to. There is no one person that I can turn to as a solution provider who can help me get things done within Microsoft. And in the next breath, Allison introduced the Partner Account Manager as the kind of the core of the Microsoft Partner Program. And all of a sudden, we had someone that was our connect into Microsoft. It was very responsive. It was very exciting. It was a powerful time in the history of the partner relationship with Microsoft. It was, 10 years later or so that in 2009 that they penned the Microsoft Partner Network. No longer something you sign up for. Now it's something you become part of, something you join. That was the pitch to all of us. And the Microsoft Partner Network had its own bevy of challenges. One of the things that was introduced at that time was the exclusivity rule. The exclusivity rule meant that if you wanted to own one of the 29 gold competencies that were then available, you had to use 4 unique people to pass the test for each gold competency. Once those 4 people had passed a test, they could not be used to pass another test. You had to have 4 other unique people. Now that meant that if you wanted to own all of the competencies, you had to have at least 120 people on your technical staff, which did not describe the overwhelming majority of Microsoft partners at the time. At that time, I was working in a company that only had 17 people in it. And we were listed as the #1 partner in the Microsoft Partner Finder because we held all but one of the competencies with 17 people. Obviously, that company's life changed dramatically, and a lot of companies' lives changed. And that's where I say Microsoft told us, we want you all to declare your specialty. What are you good at? What can people turn to you for? And once we had done that, it then became time to figure out how to partner effectively with everybody because you couldn't necessarily complete whole big projects all by yourself. The Cloud Solution Provider Program, I think, grew out of a lot of things. I think it grew out of some of the frustrations with the Microsoft Partner Network. But I also think it grew out of the first thing that Satya Nadella told us when he became CEO of Microsoft. He told us that we will be the platform and productivity company. Now, those of us who speak fluent Microsoftese knew that he was really saying we will be the Azure and Office 365 company, the platform and the productivity suite. And he didn't lie. That was very, very accurate. We all have seen how Microsoft really only focuses on those 2 major cloud platforms and the cloud platforms arrayed around them like Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365. Very clearly, Microsoft has moved to the cloud, as Steve Ballmer, I'm sorry to utter the name, but Steve Ballmer used to say, we're all into the cloud. Well, we certainly are. And so the Cloud Solution Provider Program is really Microsoft's best expression of that.
Those are great points, and just to kind of riff on one of the things that you mentioned, the 29 competencies, from MSPP, MPN. Now what you really hear Microsoft talk about is 4 or 5 competencies, just the ones that are the cloud competencies, and a lot of the rest of them are still there, although that list has been pared, but the focus is really entirely on the cloud ones. One other thing just about the program is just the difference between direct and indirect. And wanted to put this scale together, just the direct approach where you're working directly with Microsoft, and then you might also have a company that helps you with the infrastructure of billing and in bundling and setting up marketplaces, versus indirect, where you're working with that list of 14 companies that we were talking about before. When you're going direct, you really have that control over your margins, and you have a lot of flexibility on bundling, especially if you have your own services. So there are, in terms of flexibility and control over your business, direct is clearly, a better way to go. On the indirect side, a lot of the billing is provided. The support is often provided by the partner, or I should say the indirect provider, like the Ingram or whoever it is. And then the turnkey bundles, they also have their own marketplaces that you can plug into. But in a lot of cases, you don't have the flexibility to put your own IP into those bundles. So then you have a situation where you're maybe presenting two bills to a customer and starting to separate out the prices of your services, which isn't always the best way to go. And the one thing that I wanted to say about this is one of the things that I find in talking to CSP partners is that when they're sort of dipping their toe in the water, they want to figure out exactly how they need to staff for CSP and build out a business. A lot of times, starting with indirect can be a good way to start, just because I think Microsoft's numbers are that it takes maybe 5 months to turn profitable on indirect. Take that with for what it's worth. But on the direct side, there's just a lot more infrastructure to set up. So you have to have a much better idea of what you're doing, because it's I think the Microsoft numbers there are like 22 months toward profitability. It's much more of an investment.
There was something you said before, Scott, about you quoted Uncle Ben, right? With great power comes great responsibility, and Uncle Ben was right. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of the smaller solution providers in the marketplace don't necessarily want all that responsibility, or they're not equipped to handle it, and quite frankly, they don't feel the need for it. If they can have somebody else do the automated billing every month, that may be something that their current processing systems aren't equipped for. Now, I think many solution providers don't have recurring billing built in, although nowadays I think it's probably more of them, but I still think it's something that has to be monitored. It's something that has to be managed. It's just extra work. I think a lot of the people who have chosen, I'll use the terminology Tier 1 and Tier 2. The Tier 1 partners offering the billing and the first-line support, the turnkey bundles, and all the other advantages that a Tier 1 brings make it possible for the Tier 2 to really stay focused. You started talking about bringing in their own intellectual property. We've been talking about that for a long time. It's crucial. It's crucial to their future survival that they now start to develop something that is their secret sauce. The thing that they bring that nobody can compete against. Well, if you're focused on that, it's kind of hard to focus on things like billing, things like fundamental platform support. You want to focus on what it is that makes you special. So the Tier 2, I think the Tier 2 is modeled after the time when they moved all of Microsoft's internal support people, all the inside sales support. They moved it out to distribution. That worked really well. Well, the parallel here is now they've moved it out to the Tier 1 players. And the Tier 2 players can take advantage of it and stay focused on what makes their world tick. So I think that it's more than just it's more than just wanting that power. It's maybe not wanting that responsibility.
Right. Great point. Just quickly about the percentages, as far as margins go, and I present this with a grain of salt. This is we had a column about this I think last year, maybe even the year before. So these numbers are out of date. And Howard, I think when we were preparing this, you mentioned that nobody ever tells guys like you and me the real numbers. They would have no business telling us those things. But just formerly Microsoft had a referral program of its own that's being phased out in order to get everybody into the CSP program. But some of the indirect providers offer referral programs, so you're not actually selling to the customer. You're referring the indirect provider, and so those have percentage attached. If you work with an indirect provider, some of the numbers that we had heard was that you would get about a 9% margin off of these seats. And the rule of thumb on the direct provider side, where you're setting your own prices, you might be able to get up to 20% if you're bundling effectively. So all of these things are to be taken with a grain of salt, but just as sort of a back of the envelope calculation, that's at least where the numbers seem to be before. Now, I wanted to move ahead because the big thing is the IP opportunity. And if you're bundling with your own IP, then you're moving away from a discussion about the price of say the Office 365 service at the base level, and you're really able to, begin to set, much higher margins because your service is not easily replicable, and you're able to command sort of a premium for what you're doing, and you're bundling all that pricing together.
Yep.
And so, Howard, this next slide is really for you. Maybe you can explain who's on there and what this is about, because there's a quote that you got for your column for us a couple of years ago that's really telling.
Contrary to popular belief, that is a real live guy. He's just very good at broadcasting the Microsoft message. That's Phil Sorgen. Phil Sorgen used to be the global channel chief at Microsoft, the job held now by the lovely and talented Gabriela Schuster. Phil and I had a conversation. This is going way back. This is going back to probably 2011 or 2010. I was doing a profile on Phil for my column in Redmond Channel Partner called The Changing Channel. And in our conversation, Phil said to me, look, Microsoft only has one job, and that job is to provide a platform that our partners can be successful selling their solutions on. Now, in my reporting, I pointed out that presupposes that solution providers actually had their own solutions to run on that platform. And there's another gentleman who was at Microsoft at that time also by the name of Bill Patterson. Bill was at that time the product manager for Dynamics CRM. And 2011 was a very important historical year. It was the first time that anybody ever introduced the online version of something before they introduced the on-prem version. In this case, I'm talking about Dynamics CRM. CRM 2011 was introduced in the cloud before it was released as software to be run on your own servers. And I interviewed Bill about that, and he explained to me the title of this slide. He explained to me that we're going to witness an evolution of solution. When I asked him what that meant, he explained to me that when you ask a solution provider what they mean by solution, more often than not, what they explain to you comes back as infrastructure. They're going to throw more infrastructure at something, more servers, more storage, more switches and routers, and so forth. And that is not going to be satisfactory to customers for very much longer. Customers will not tolerate that very much longer. Customers want business relevant solutions, solutions that actually solve challenges they face in their business. Now, this is 2011. This is 7 years ago. And clearly, over the last few years, we have seen that come to fruition. Customers very much want to have business relevant solutions that they can sell, that they can purchase from their solution providers. This means that solution providers really have to stop focusing so much on the foundation and really, or as I like to put it, stop focusing on the canvas and start focusing on the paint. And as time has gone on, that's gotten stronger and stronger. Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of solution provider partners leave the channel or change their business because they can't sell so much infrastructure. People aren't standing up as many servers or as much storage on-prem as they used to. I think that's kind of an understatement. As a matter of fact, most partners today are doing exactly what Microsoft told them they have to do: focus on selling cloud. Let us take care of the infrastructure. Let us operate the foundation. You worry about the business relevant solutions that customers are clamoring for.
So I think that really sets the table nicely for the rest of the discussion about what are the areas where CSPs are beginning to really build business above and beyond the Microsoft stack that sort of undergirds it. Let's talk about the first one, XSP. This is something that you wanted to talk about, Howard. So I'll let you take that one.
Okay, so I have recently completed a series of stories. The series was titled Tomorrow's Tech. And basically it detailed where MSPs are going to go when they're done being MSPs. You can't stay an MSP forever. The reality is that everybody and their brother-in-law is becoming an MSP to the point where the acronym MSP is as blurred as cloud was when it first came out, or any of the other acronyms we've seen. Everybody uses it for partner. The word partner. We've blurred that word to the point where it's unrecognizable. So today you're an MSP, you're a managed service provider, which really doesn't say a lot about what you do. If you watch Microsoft, if you watch what they've done over the past 3 to 5 years, you've seen a shift from the classic infrastructure provider being the favored child of the Microsoft Partner Program to the ISV. I mean, the independent software vendor is, the beloved child of Microsoft today because, not for nothing, ISVs create workloads. They create software that will run on Azure that will be those solutions that Phil talked about. So the more solutions that a partner creates, the happier Microsoft is with them. And you'll see, I found one ISV that simply created tools to help you control your spend on Azure. Well, something that's crucially important because people aren't consuming Azure fast enough because they don't know how much they're spending. They're getting big overage bills. Well, somebody saw that, created software to manage it, and built a very successful practice managing Azure spend. You look at all these console providers out there like Datto and BitTitan and others. They're creating consoles that help MSPs do more. Become more adept and go deeper into their customers' environments to manage even more thoroughly. So these ISVs are building a success of their own in their own way. Recently, we saw one publication extend into a new publication that's focused solely on MSSPs, Managed Security Service Providers. And indeed, a lot of providers are focusing on security because we've seen with the meddling in the 2016 election and all those things, we've seen the critical nature of security as vividly as we possibly can. So people are absolutely flocking to that. Microsoft, in their first ever professional degree program, introduced data science as the materia for the first course. The first curriculum was become a data scientist. Well, data scientists are very expensive people. Any of you who are out there who want to have a next career doing something that will pay you insane money, go out and become a data scientist. The rest of you, hire data scientists. Bring them aboard in your company. Become a DSP, a data services provider. Why? Because once people collect all that big data, and once they process it and, and categorize it and collate it and do all those wonderful things. Somebody has to interpret it. Somebody has to analyze it. And somebody has to distill information, wisdom, knowledge, and decision-making support out of all of that data. A multidisciplinary kind of life that requires a lot of different kinds of education. Those people are very expensive, and anybody who's expensive can be rented for a very healthy fee. So you'll see data service providers. The IoT will create a bunch of companies that go out and install and maintain and support and update all of these different IoT devices that are controlling and measuring and monitoring the world. These are just a few examples, and there are plenty more, but clearly, CSP itself, the cloud solution provider, you have to become expert at making all these different cloud solutions from all these different vendors and sources play well together. They all have their own security protocols. They all have their own performance protocols. We've got to be able to bring them together in such a way that they work well. That is a marketable skill, and that's why CSPs are becoming very popular. Customers need help figuring out how to put that all together. So, I think that we're going to see over the next few years a few dozen ways in which today's MSP, who was yesterday's reseller, become tomorrow's something else.
Right. Yeah, no, those are great points about the specialization opportunities out there, and just specialization from both technology standpoints and and even business model standpoints. So one of the ways that that it sort of makes sense to go through this is to go up the sort of the chain of customer size, because the opportunities and the business requirements of of companies really vary sort of wildly based on whether they're an SMB or go ahead.
I think it serves to mention it's not just customer size; it's also the size of your own business, your own practice. Just about every how-to session I've ever done starts by saying, "Look at yourself." You really have to begin with yourself. Look at your business. Look at the resources you have. Look at the skill sets that are aboard. Look at the skill sets that are available to you through partners, and begin to understand where you fit in the food chain. It may be that you don't have the resources to attack the largest customers. You may make a lot more money and be a lot more successful focused on the small market. Many have focused for a long time now on the mid-market because, quite frankly, there's millions of them. There are millions of players in the mid-market, millions of customers available in the mid-market. Do you have the resources? Can you get to the place where you have the resources? So, I think we should take a look at, where you can play and what you can be doing if you're a small, mid-sized, or larger IT practice.
Yeah, no, good points. So as far as those SMB customers go, at least. One of the things that we're seeing out there is just people adding in services on top of the Microsoft services, and those tend to be a lot more would you say, Howard, a lot more sort of straightforward and almost horizontal in the SMB market?
Yeah, and this is where I get to say something that I say all the time, which is that IT practices cannot live by subscriptions alone. I think a lot of players got in thinking, oh, if I just sell a lot of Office 365, I'll make a lot of money. Well, they have found that to not necessarily be true. The return is okay, but you would have to have, the early trainings talked about how you have to double the number of customers you have to make the kind of money you've been making now. That's not pretty. That was never pretty, and it made a lot of people angry. The reality is that you want to make money up front as well as your recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is great, and everybody will get up in front of you and say, oh, the panacea, the great thing is, the holy grail is monthly recurring revenue. Well, it's simply not totally true. yeah, it's great to have, but I want to make money today and tomorrow. And so you need to start to think about, what is it that I can sell beyond that one subscription? On this particular slide, we talked about a couple of things, backup and recovery. Data backup is still important. Well, there are plenty of great resources out there that can give you a lot of granularity of control over your backup, from simple data backup to high availability and immediate turnaround and business continuity. That's a whole spectrum, and you need to be able to work with your customer to determine how they balance their budget against how much, how quick a return to full operation they need. So backing up to cloud is critical. Antivirus, anti-spam, anti-malware, endpoint security. You're talking about unified threat management here. And then you get to social engineering. And I think this is something that is so available to even the smallest practices, and yet so many of them just pass it right by, which is the old PEBCAC concept. That's a PEBCOC problem. PEBCOC standing for problem exists between keyboard and chair. Right? that segment between the keyboard and the chair, namely the user. Right. I think a lot of partners are making unbelievable money by really focusing on the process of onboarding. How do I get my users to switch to a fully cloud-enabled environment? How can I get them to take advantage of the new capabilities they have? How can I make sure they're supported so that they don't say, oh, this is terrible on the first day? There's a lot of training, and you mentioned security training in particular. Especially with phishing attacks and ransomware, the user is the point of greatest weakness. You need to train that user to be on guard. So these are all wonderful opportunities you described here for even the smallest of solution provider practices can start to build these into their business. And if they don't, they really need to start thinking about recipes for pizza, because they're going to have to get into another business.
Well, and one thing that I would mention too about the the training opportunity is it's really an opportunity, especially in SMB customers, to get in front of them and show them that you know what you're talking about on tech, and it's going to spark other conversations. Because if the CEO of this small and medium business sits in on the training, which would be ideal because they're the best targets for social engineering attacks. Other questions are going to come up, and suddenly, who knows what kind of projects can come out of it, or what kind of business can come out of it.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on to. I think this might be sort of the most interesting segment in a lot of ways. The mid-market opportunity on CSP. Just this opportunity to pick a vertical. And I wonder, Howard, if you could speak a little bit to the importance of establishing a vertical and how much more important it is now maybe than it's ever been before.
Yeah, and again, it goes back, Scott, to the concept of specialization. The more specialized you're, it's like medicine. You know that I very much see our industry being modeled more and more along the lines that medicine has organized itself. Yes, there are generalists, but I personally predict that there will be very few generalists after the next several years. I think that the generalist is going away. Specialists are becoming the rule. I know for myself, I've given a how to bring a vertical into your business presentation many times, and in that presentation I explained that we don't go out and pick verticals. We don't. You don't pick a vertical. The verticals tend to pick you. This may not be true over the next couple of years, but it's been true up until now. In my own case, long ago in an IT practice far, far away, we turned around and realized that we had about 50 customers in the retail space. They were big retailers, big retail organizations. They had national presence or global presence in some cases. We didn't go out to do that. It's just that our salespeople encountered one after another after another. And so we had them. There they were. We had a vertical already in-house. Well, the next thing we did was to go out and find the best possible point-of-sale systems that we could find. We vetted them thoroughly. We tore them apart surgically. We just said we want to know everything there is to know about you to determine which ones we feel comfortable representing. And then we found other applications that worked with POS and worked with large retail operations, big ERPs that lent themselves better to retail operation than others. And there was an amazing number of retail-focused software products that we could integrate into our business that we weren't selling. Well, we started selling them. And we started, I mean, we had 50 customers to start with that we'd already sold something to, so it was 5 times easier to sell to them, as everybody says. And it was very easy to get them interested in at least one, if not more, of the products that we had unearthed and that we were now authorized to implement. And as we implemented them and as we implemented them over and over again, we got better and better and better at it. And because we were smart enough to keep our price where it was, we used a lot less time, a lot less resource, and still charged the same amount of money. We became more and more profitable. So my recommendation to any practice is if you can't find any other way to specialize, if you don't want to become an application developer, because everybody immediately thinks, oh, I'll become an app developer, because that's business relevant solution. I'm developing an application for that business. Well, learning to code is no trivial matter. So why don't you use somebody else's code and be the implementer, be the support organization, be the deployment, and be the trainer. You know, be the support and trainer. You know, there's so many things you can do. You know, whatever market you want to adopt. I, for a brief time, was president of a company that focused on the legal vertical. Not one I would recommend because lawyers tend to take delivery. You know, most people take delivery and pay. Lawyers take delivery and then litigate. Not fun. So, you know, I would avoid that. I'm sorry. I love the legal vertical. I do. But I would strongly recommend that everybody who's on this call today go back and look at your customer base and evaluate them based on industry segment. See, you know, you may find that you have a lot of companies that are in, you know, discrete manufacturing. Well, there's plenty of great resources you can sell there. So, you know, the one takeaway from today is go look at your own customer base and see what verticals are already aboard.
Yeah, and just kind of let your vertical sort of surface from your customer list. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great advice. So I advanced to the next slide, which is, you know, because you were talking a little bit about coding and how you don't have to code. And I was wondering if you could, you know, what are sort of the steps, you know, is sort of like along the, you know, along the road to coding, you know, as you're developing a vertical, because it was actually one of you know Phil Sorgen's messages all those years ago. Was, you know, you need IP, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have you know a fully baked application ready to go for a vertical. There's a lot of ways to develop IP as a partner.
Yep, and again, I did go back earlier and talk about ISVs. They are developing apps. They are making money. I mean, one great example that sits out there is Nintex. Not a lot of people know that Nintex started out as a solution provider. That's what they did for a living. And then they realized that a lot of the customizations they had created for SharePoint were useful. So they went to market selling those customizations. And then they sold customization, tailored customization, and more products and more products. And today, nobody thinks of Nintex as a solution provider. They're a software provider. Well, that's a story that's been told over and over and over again. And we sometimes, a lot of people just don't realize that the software companies they deal with today were solution providers just like them a long time ago. I am not seeing that slide, by the way, on my screen. I'm not sure if that's me. But I'm still seeing the pick a vertical slide. But you don't have to code. I mean, the reality is that, yeah, you can certainly learn to code. But there are also products out there that let you develop your own IP in other ways. You know, I mentioned BitTitan before, perfect example. You know, with their platform, you can store scripts. Scripts are a pain in the neck. You have to go out to GitHub and figure out where they are and pull them down. And I mean, when you're on site and you're working on a customer's location, that's a lot of time wasted, and the customer knows it. They feel it. You know, now you have a console where you have all of your scripts, like a toolbox. You have all your scripts in one place. Well, that becomes your own IP, those scripts, and what you do with them becomes your IP. And it's yours. You developed it. You can charge for it, and it's not likely that anybody else has it. So you don't have that much competition out there. That's one great way. There's a product out there called IntelliDocs that allows you to move tiles on a graphical interface. And all you have to know is your own workflow. If you know your workflow, you can move those tiles into place to create applications that you can then run and that will run your business for you. Well, not a lot of businesses are going to want to do that, but I think a lot of partners can go into business learning a customer's workflow, and that gets you as deep and sticky in that customer as you possibly can get, and then building those apps using that graphical interface. You know, App Portals does some of that, and a lot of other Microsoft tools. So, you know, there are
some of the other ways too are just, you know, the getting familiar with the apps, you know, in that vertical. And just learning how to implement them and customize them and, you know, optimize them. And, you know, like you were saying, as, you know, as a partner, you're dealing with, you know, potentially dozens of companies, you know, in that field. So, you know, you've got daily experience, you know, implementing the stuff that they would just be doing once.
Yeah, well, and
you know, and so just
you
know, having that expertise in the vertical applications of that, you know, that space. You know, it's a form of IP.
The trick to that, right, at the end of the day, the trick to that is figuring out the things that a customer wouldn't do themselves and doing those things. Well, not only wouldn't do for themselves, but shouldn't be doing for themselves. Because a lot of customers don't have anybody on staff who should be building applications, and they don't want to budget for it. And they can save a lot of money engaging you to build those applications. I know somebody out there in the marketplace today who is still building applications on the Office suite. I mean, back when I got into the business in the 80s, you know, creating macros in Office to get the different applications working together, that was the big deal for Microsoft. Oh, and there's a whole programming language underneath this. You can make these things work together. Well, this guy is still doing that, and he's making a fortune customizing Office to do everything from CRM to ERP, because a lot of the customers he serves are very small and don't need all the bells and whistles. So he can build a much smaller product for them using tools that they're familiar with. You know,
that's fantastic.
That kind of intuition, that kind of innovation, that kind of smarts is the kind of thing that's going to make the difference between the survivor and the non-survivor over the next several years. You've got to really innovate, which means nothing's ever changed. You know, we as an industry, that's what keeps, right? No, it's true. We as an industry, what keeps it fresh for all of us, the reason that everybody on this session today and everybody else who's, you know, all of our colleagues, the reason we stay, the reason we love what we do so much is because we're constantly called upon to innovate. And I don't know, it never gets boring. Yeah,
no, it doesn't. And just, you know, to move up to sort of our last segment there, you know, the enterprise, you know, obviously all the vertical, you know, approach that works in the mid-market is also, you know, key for the enterprise and you know, the vertical and specialization. But there's one other element, and you touched on this before, and just, you know, we're running low on time, but maybe you can touch on it again, just this idea of cloud cost control in Azure and the opportunity for partners in, you know, in protecting customers from, you know, having their eyes bug out of their head, you know, for a monthly Azure bill that's way outside of what they'd expected.
Right. Well, you know, one of the things we talk about is this new service that cloud solution providers should be providing. I don't know if they all are, but it's the whole concept of capacity management. You know, we've always managed networks. We've always managed to keep the circuits up, keep them performing well, keep them secure. But now we also have to worry about managing capacities because we live in a consumption-based billing world. Customers pay for what they use. So if you're the one who says to them, hey, you're provisioned for this much storage, and you've only used this much storage, so you're wasting this much storage, you don't need to be paying for it, throttle down. Mm-hmm. Now, what customer won't love you for coming in and saying that? What customer won't love you for being the one to say to them, here's how you immediately spend less money? So just that one alone, capacity management, monitor their capacities, monitor how much they're provisioned for in the way of memory, in the way of processor power, in the way of storage. I mean, there's so many different metrics that you can monitor, that you can measure, and that you can control. And you can save customers 10, 20, 30 or more %. I mean, the reason that Microsoft has had a challenge getting their consumption numbers up to where they need to be is because everybody became careful. They got a big bill for $50, $100, more, $1,000. Azure overages. That's because people were just using Azure. They were just turning it on, trying it with things, and just leaving it there. When they were done, they're like little kids. You finish playing with your toys, you just leave your toys where you were. Well, you can't do that because you're paying for it. So I mentioned one, that one software company that created a tool just to monitor and manage spend. That alone, I mean, the stat they gave me is that their product reduces Azure spend by 30% within the first 30 days after the customer started using it. That's amazing.
It is. And it's one of those things where it's the perfect place for a partner to play because, on the one hand, they're cheerleading, the Azure services and all the benefits of it. But on the other, the partner is independent of Microsoft, and they have the ability to say, look, this is the way that, Microsoft, intentionally or not, is really going to hurt you or has the potential to hurt you, and we can protect you because we understand how it works and we understand these tools, and just sort of a perfect opportunity.
It's the objectivity of a partner, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well put. And unfortunately, I think we're going to have to let people check out this checklist, by downloading the slides because we're nearly out of time. But just so you know, this is a great checklist that Howard put together.
If I can just give the short course on it then really quickly, there are services you can provide to a cloud customer before, during, and after the cloud transition. And that's really what this list represents. Somebody's got to design the cloud solution. Somebody's got to deploy the cloud solution, provision all the services. Somebody has to migrate all the data and migrate the applications. That may require some changes to all of those, so the services involved there. Once the users are transitioned and trained, they're still going to need support on an ongoing basis. They're going to need capacity management. They're going to need network management. They're going to need somebody keeping all of their cloud providers honest. So there's a way to make money up front. There's the monthly recurring revenue throughout the life cycle, and there are ongoing other services. If your monthly recurring revenue is only coming from the cloud subscription, you are doing something wrong and you are shortchanging yourself. You can dramatically increase your monthly recurring revenue and your upfront revenue hit by making sure you're providing either yourself or through partnering all of the services on this checklist.
Well said. Okay. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. And so we've got the Q&A portion coming up, but at this point, we've got a word from our sponsor.
Thanks, guys. Scott, Howard, you guys are a tough act to follow, but thanks for hosting such a valuable session. And a big thank you to everybody on today's webinar. My name is James O'Connor. I wanted to dovetail off today's discussion to share a few challenges we here at AppDirect are seeing around the globe with nearly every MSP we talk to who are looking to become or already are a direct provider. I'll also provide a couple success stories to kind of round it out. So we often talk with customers and partners about this notion of the digital economy and what it means for their business. And really, all it means is that products and services are becoming digitized to transact and deliver at the speed of the customer. So what does this have to do with what we're discussing here today? Well, whether you're a small or large MSP, born in the cloud or traditional, It's important to understand that the market has changed and it's moving faster by the day. AMI Partners recently published a study showcasing that global IT spend is projected to reach $4 trillion by 2021, and about 24% of that, nearly $1 trillion, is projected to be spent on managed services. Pretty awesome, right? And I think if you can account for the challenges that you'll face in this new digital economy as a cloud solution provider and solve for those, you can find a strong foothold in this opportunity. So let's actually talk about a few of those challenges. The first one is a transition to cloud. This is really all about time to market with new service offerings. One of the big challenges we often see for MSPs is wanting to partner with new ISVs beyond Microsoft on this cloud journey. The time to partner can be unpredictable, with legal and commercial negotiations often taking weeks, so from what we've seen, more likely months, not to mention technical integration work to extend self-serve capabilities to customers. What if you could eliminate the overhead in that process and introduce time-bound predictability, resulting in days rather than weeks or months? And once you've done that, the job isn't over. Now you actually have to create a bundled solution offering, like Scott and Howard were just saying, and find a way to take that to market. Accounting for your managed services plus multiple third-party cloud services with subscription billing stacked on top is incredibly complex. Okay, so let's say you've tackled that challenge. What's next? Well, as we're all seeing, margins in the cloud are a lot slimmer. That's pretty clear. And that has a massive impact to your bottom line and your cash flow, especially when that solution cost is amortized over the customer's life cycle. We believe the most efficient way to rapidly improve those margins is through automation. Whether you're using multiple systems to place orders and manage customers today, or manually handling subscription bills and vendor reconciliation, these will prevent you from growing and succeeding in this new economy. And that leads us to our last point, meeting customer expectations. In this increasingly commoditized world, it's never been easier for customers to move to a new cloud solution provider. If you can't make it easy for your customers to manage and grow their business, you're forcing your customer to find a partner who will. Why should customers have to call in every time they want to add more seats for the new hires they just brought on board, or upgrade their license because the business has new requirements that dictate a higher service level? All of us have grown accustomed to the immediate satisfaction of ordering a lift in an app and having it arrive within minutes, or upgrading our Netflix subscription to support more TV screens at once without talking to a single person. You need to offer the same value, which, funny enough, will also improve your margins, your bottom line, and actually create more stickiness with your customers too. And I know, these challenges may seem insurmountable now, but we can help. AppDirect is a cloud commerce and distribution platform that can alleviate all these pains and accelerate your success. You get one platform to manage all of your service offerings, own the customer experience, and extend self-serve capabilities to your customers. Since our founding in 2009, we've partnered with over 300 world-class ISVs and even streamlined the contracting process. Dustin, a leading VAR in the Nordics, has begun their shift to providing cloud solutions. In less than 60 days, we helped them save nearly 2.5 years of commercial and technical overhead to take 15 new cloud services to market for the first time. Another customer, a $1 billion VAR transitioning to becoming a strategic MSP, saw new cloud subscription revenue reach over $2 million in less than 12 months. And we're seeing new MSP customers, both large and small, hit over $1 million in net new cloud subscription revenue in under 6 months. So it's definitely possible to make the transition and succeed quickly. How you do that and how easy or difficult you make it for yourself is ultimately up to you. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to appdirect.com and reach out to us there. We can run a quick analysis of your current business to identify where we can help, the impact and revenue growth and OpEx savings you should expect. Thanks again for your time today, and good luck on your journey.
Great. Thanks a lot, James. And now we'll turn into the Q&A portion. Unfortunately, we've left very little time, but I did want to thank Nick for a couple of points. He mentioned PICNIC, which is another fun acronym of problem in chair, not in computer, and also mentioned that cost management is now part of Azure Stack, which I don't think means that the opportunity is gone. I think it's still there's still a huge opportunity for cost management, but there are some in-stack options for helping control costs, and again, that's something where a partner's expertise, with those things can I think really be helpful. Howard, one question that's come up here is about bundling, and where you're coming into the issue of well, let me just read the question. One issue we have is bundling products where some are licensed per device and some by user. So you give the example of Cisco Umbrella, which has user licensing, and ESET antivirus as device. And I don't really know what to say about that other than just keep hitting on your partner vendors to provide licensing that you can work with. I'm not really sure what else to do. You kind of have to drag everybody kicking and screaming into something that works for their partners. Do you have any insights on ways to deal with that kind of issue?
Yeah, I think you've actually discussed a little bit of the answer to that earlier on when you talked about how CSP is really an answer to the issue that partners really wanted to be able to do the billing themselves. That was a problem for a long time. Partners told Microsoft. Microsoft solved it. Maybe the most important answer here is to remind everybody that the people who run Cisco and the people who run Microsoft, they're people. And you can talk to them. You can call them. You can email them. You can show up at their door. They're people. They're running a business that's in business to make money. And anything that you can suggest that will help them make money and also help you make money and solve a problem, they're going to be willing to listen to. For some reason, I speak to a lot of partners who to this day think of the Satya Nadellas of the world as some kind of deity sitting on high. Now, I know Satya in particular is trying to become the next Buddha, but come on, he's a regular guy, and he's a nice guy. So, feel free to talk to these people. Reach out to these people. You will find somebody who will listen, especially if you are selling their products and services. They love people who are selling their products and services. So if you have a problem where all you have is per device pricing and you want per seat pricing, per user pricing, find somebody on high at the manufacturer and talk to them about it. It is more solvable than you think it is. Also, though, one of the habits that a lot of solution providers fall into that you have to get yourself out of is thinking that you have to reveal every single detail about what you're doing and how you're doing it. On one level, a lot of customers don't care. They don't care how many hours something is going to take. They don't care what products you're using to solve their problem, what you're using to migrate data from one place to another. They don't care if you're using Migration Wiz or Skykick or whatever. They don't care. They just care that it gets done. So take all of your pricing, take all of your numbers, and figure out how to express them as one number. People want to know two things. One, what will it do for them? And two, what will it cost them? And if you can answer those two questions, you can win. So stop rolling out all the details. Focus in on how to bring them together into one number and one offer.
Well, that's some great wisdom from the very experienced Howard Cohen. Yeah.
Well, there you go again with the age thing. I want to thank Nick Dixon. Who's out there, who contributed an alternative to PEBCAC, which he sent us, which is PICNIC, which stands for Problem in Chair, Not in Computer. I love that. Thank you, Nick. It's great.
Yep.
I will use that.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, on that note, I just want to thank everybody for participating today, for tuning in, and Howard and AppDirect. Thanks for everything on this call. Appreciate it.
And thanks for
one other thing. Yep. And the recording will be available within 24 to 48 hours. You'll get it in an email, and you can access it in the same URL that you accessed the presentation today. Have a great day.